Oh, wait, now I gotta.
Yay!
Got it.
Miracles happen.
Good job. Good girl. Good girl. We've all seen that. Okay. Well, as I would hope most of you are aware, some of you may not be, but we are looking forward to the Feast of Pentecost this Sunday, which is when the Holy Spirit descended on the not just the apostles, but the disciples of the Lord. But 10 days before that, which would have been last Thursday, is called Ascension Day. And Ascension Day is the day that Jesus left this earth bodily and ascended to his Father in heaven. And which is something we hope we all will do. So in recognition of Ascension Day, I would like to share this prayer with you from the Book of Common Prayer. Okay. Almighty God, whose blessed Son, our Savior Jesus Christ, ascended far above all heavens, that he might fill all things, mercifully give us faith to perceive that according to his promise, he abideth with his church on earth, even unto the end of the ages. And grant, we beseech thee, Almighty God, that like as we do believe thy only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, to have ascended into the heavens, so may we also in heart and mind ascend, and with him continually dwell, who liveth and reigneth with thee and the Holy Spirit, one God, world without end. Amen.
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 Think upon that during the week, that this is the reason God created man. If you look at the Catholic catechism, what's the purpose of man? Okay. The answer is, we had to memorize this when we had first communion in the first grade. Back when I could memorize, it said, God made us to love and adore him above all things, and to be happy with him in heaven. And that happy with him in heaven would be our ascension into God's living place. So he dwells with us here in the Spirit, but it would be really nice. And I think I don't think any of you would be sitting here this morning if you didn't believe that that is our purpose, okay, and our future, which is glorious, okay? And as sad as we are for Donna and her family, this is where her sister is. And we can be happy in that thought. So we'll keep that in mind. Okay, last week we left Elkanah and his wife Hannah and his other wife Penina, okay, at the temple. And remember, folks, the temple was not in Jerusalem yet, okay? We are pre-King days. So the temple or the ark were in Shiloh. Now, bear in mind, the temple in Shiloh was nothing compared to what Solomon built in Jerusalem many years later. But it was their place of worship. And just like the Israelites or Jewish people used to go to the temple annually, and sometimes more than annually, to celebrate some of the great feasts and to make their sacrifices. Okay, this is what they did in Shiloh, not on as grand a scale, but yet they still observe, and we'll come up to this in a second, where they brought animals for offerings. Okay, so this was their deal. They left their home and they went to the temple. Just to throw in a little thing I believe in here, not a theological belief, but they must have been a fairly well-meaning circumstances, okay? Because when we do get to what they brought, it's a pretty good list, okay? Starting out with the bulls, okay, and other animals, and we know how that filters down. Back in Numbers in Deuteronomy, all the legalities of sacrifice, etc., were named and what to do. Okay, it filtered down, and if you weren't rich, obviously you didn't have a bull. Okay, so that you had to have money to have, but it filtered down. If you didn't have a bull, well, you could offer a lamb. If you didn't, and it filtered down to, if you didn't have any of those things, you could bring a dove. And this, we know this is what Joseph and Mary did when they brought Jesus to the temple on the 8th day to be dedicated to God. So this family had to be a fairly good means. So making the trip to Shiloh from Ramah, where they were, wasn't a hardship for them. They were able to do it, and they did it annually. And the point is brought out in some of the earlier verses here that Elkanah and his family were faithful to the Lord. And there's a comment made that he brought the sacrifices to Eli, who was the high priest. And there's mention made of Eli's 2 sons. And the commentary says the only reason they're really mentioned is they were very, very wicked. And there's an incident comes later on how that's dealt with by God. But what I love that's brought out, which I hadn't thought of till I read the commentary, was that Eli was a very faithful priest. Elkanah was a very faithful Israelite. And even though everybody apparently knew these 2 sons of Eli were not nice people. They took wrath, they took money, they sacrificed things from the poor. They did not do what God had commanded us to do. But yet, Elkanah still brought all these sacrificial things to the temple and gave them to Eli. And that points out something we sometimes forget in our lives. God's grace comes from God to us. Now, there may be a priest there in the middle who is praying for us, offering sacrifice or whatever, but our receiving that grace does not depend on the sanctity or the goodness of the priest that is accepting these. That grace comes from God to the person making the sacrifice. So it doesn't matter how bad that priest is. He may be the person it goes through, but he has nothing to do with the amount or the value or the feeling of grace that comes to the person or family who is sacrificing. And we have that in today's day and age. We do have ministers and priests who are not very nice people, all right? And they may not be openly wicked, but they may be full of more sin than we are full of sin. But our reception by God has nothing to do with their hardness of heart. It's strictly between the receiver and God. So always keep that in mind when we deal with asking God for his grace. So we've got Elkanah and Hannah, and I can never say her name or remember how to say her name, Hananiah, there with her children. They're all there to offer the sacrifice. So, and again, this is something that they did annually or more. However, Hannah is in a very, very bad state. The Lord has closed her womb. She has no children. Where Peninnah, instead of being sympathetic or consoling her or saying, play with my kids. They're my kids. My kids are your kids. Okay. She was very, very mean to Hannah. And I would guess that she didn't do this in the presence of Elkanah, or he may have said something. But obviously.
Excuse me, Janet raised her hand a second.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Yes.
I read ahead and it looks like Hannah had a child.
Yeah, but we didn't get there yet.
Oh, well,
We've
just
got a long, Yeah, oh, yes, she does. Yes. And that child is fabulous. Okay. And actually, exactly what you just mentioned is the crux of our lesson today. Okay, how this comes about and what brings us. But up to this point, Hannah has had no children. So, but the other one has, and is very mean about it. Taunts her, makes her absolutely miserable, makes her feel worthless because a woman in those days was shunned, and so not shunned physically by the community, but she was thought to be cursed. Okay, and that God did this. And I think I made a comment last week that everyone always blamed the woman. They didn't know in those days that sometimes it's the man's, I shouldn't say fault, but the man's problem that they don't have children. And in those days, you didn't adopt children like you do today, which is to me a beautiful, beautiful thing. So anyway, Hannah is feeling very, very depressed. They come to this feast and they're having their festival meal or friendship meal. And Elkanah loves Hannah so much that he gives everybody their portion of the food, but he gives her twice as much food, but she still can't, she's so upset she cannot eat. And I think we've all been there. If we have great emotional issues, sometimes you just can't eat, or you throw it up because you just your stomach, your whole being is so upset that food does not do well within your body. And so she was not eating. So she is extremely upset. And this is where we left them. She left the table and she couldn't do anything. So we will be reading strictly from First Samuel today. So just get your Bibles open to that. And we are going to be dealing only with chapter 1. And we'll kind of go around and have people read on this. There is one little note here that's kind of the way human beings think. It says, it seems strange that Peninnah, who seems to be a very bad character, was blessed with children, and Hannah, who seems to be a good character, was cursed with barrenness. We don't understand God's ways until he completes his plan. And that kind of fits in with that old title, why do bad things happen to people? God's got a plan. And the plan for Hannah and Elkanah that is God's plan. He did this for a reason. And we're going to pull this out of the text of the Bible as we go through. This was not punishing Hannah by any means. This was making her a part of God's plan. So Jane, you're up in the corner there.
Yep.
Would you please read verses 8 through 11, and they're subtitled here, Hannah's Godly Vow.
Okay.
That's 8 through 11.
8 through 11. Hannah, why are you crying? Her husband Elkanah asked. Why won't you eat? Why are you troubled? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? Hannah got up after they ate and drank at Shiloh. Eli the priest was sitting on a chair by the doorpost of the Lord's tabernacle. Deeply hurt, Hannah prayed to the Lord and wept with many tears. Making a vow, she pleaded, Lord of hosts, if you will take notice of your servant's affliction, remember and not forget me, and give your servant a son. I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and his hair will never be cut.
What does that signify when she says, no razor shall come upon your head?
Nazarite.
Samson,
That
not Samson.
That,
Yeah.
That's okay, because
Yeah.
it's going to be the answer to something in a minute. So hold that thought. That the Nazarite, okay? And there are 3 things we'll review in just a second, but they didn't have to go through saying, no razor shall come to his head, and and the other things, okay? this was significant enough that if you saw a person where their hair had never been cut, all right, that was enough presence to know that they were dedicated as a Nazarite. All right. So this was her dedicating her son. The words, Hannah, why do you weep? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? In Elkanah's response to Hannah's sorrow, we see that he really did love her very much. Yet many men, like many men, he was very insensitive. He did not recognize that she had needs he could not fulfill, such as the desire to be a mother. And by saying he's better than 10 sons, he's referring strictly to her physical needs, such as the fact, look, I feed you, I clothe you, I gave you a double portion, so that makes me better than if you had a whole bunch of sons. But he is not answering the emotional problem that she's going through by not having a child. And that's very significant. She prayed to the Lord. Okay. Hannah was in bitterness of soul and great anguish. When they talk about bitterness of soul here, they're not talking about being bitter towards another person, a sourness, that kind of thing. They're talking about the hardness, the horror. It's like saying you swallow a bitter pill, and this is what she had. She is having a bitter pill, and that's where that word is coming from. Okay, but she did do the right thing. Hannah took those bitter and anguished feelings to God honestly. That's the important word, honestly, in prayer. Okay, if I can read this. God knows why we do what we do. It's in our hearts, and that's what God reads. We need to bring our prayers, our problems, our troubles, the good times, the bad times to God. And we need to be very honest about it. Lots of times we are not very honest to the rest of the world, okay? Witness the Pharisee and then the poor man in the back of the church. The Pharisee, beautiful prayers, okay? And isn't this wonderful? I'm here, God. I'm giving you so much. I'm just this great, great person, okay? And he's praying Psalms and all that kind of stuff. But his heart is hard. It's no big deal. I mean, you can say anything. But so his prayers are not good prayers. Where the poor guy in the back of the church very quietly is saying, I'm a sinner, I'm so sorry, etc. That's coming from the heart. And God reads the heart. He doesn't need the words out loud. This comes right here from the God. This whole section to me is a very good commentary on praying and how to pray and why we pray. And sometimes we do lose sight of that. How many times, I'm so guilty of this. How many times do I pray prayers that I know by heart, such as the Lord's Prayer and some others, and I memorize them, so they're said, and unconsciously they're coming from my heart, and the words, but I've lost. I can get finished and say, did I mention such and such in that prayer? Because they're rote and we say them. Okay. Yes, Kathy.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
Well, it's like when you're doing anything, like if I'm driving a car and something happens and I react in a certain way, there I go straight to God in my mind. I don't say anything, but I do. I said, forgive me for if that was harsh or, but I'm going to God, and that's the way I feel. And to me, that's a little bitty prayer. So I do it all day long, whatever I'm doing.
Kathy, I'm with you on that one, because I do better by noticing and saying something about what's happening through the day than going into my bedroom for an hour, kneeling I can't kneel anymore because I never get up again. But kneeling and praying to God, and that doesn't work for me. I'm sorry, it just does not work. My mind's in a million places. But it's that little incident every day. Some of you have never heard me say this little prayer I do, but others of you will remember. But just what you're saying, Kathy, that you just thank God that you got through something or whatever. As our children grew up, our grace at meals was, God is great, God is good, let me thank him for this food. And some of us, I didn't grow up with it, I'm too old. It wasn't out there then, but some of you perhaps. Especially when I'm driving, if I'm in a hurry and I'm late and let the lights be green, okay, and I go, oh, and they're green and it's green and it's green and I'm making on time. My prayer is always, God is great, God is good, let me thank him for my mood, because I arrived there, on time, where I need to be, and I didn't hit anybody. So,
right. And sometimes it's about, when you live with another person, sometimes it's about having quiet time alone. You don't get interrupted or, something else going on. Yes. So that's what it is for me.
Sure. No, and I think that pleases God very much. He gave us prayers, but actually the only prayer he gave us is the Lord's Prayer. Marlene, you're on mute.
I've developed, and I'm going to call it a habit, which is a bad word to use, but every time, like if I read something, when Jane sends out a message or somebody else sends out a message, or I hear something, I stop immediately and say a prayer then.
Good.
And if you get into that habit, it becomes it just automatic. And it doesn't make it any less important if you pray about it right then and there.
I think that's critical, Marlene, and that's my feeling. I don't look for good things in my life and say, I'll talk to God about that later. It's now in the present. And I think God loves that more than our taking that hour on our knees and saying a rosary. Now I do pray the rosary, but it doesn't do as much for me emotionally as that every day. And to me, that says to God, I know you're out there, God. I don't just pray to him first thing in the morning and last thing at night. It's these little things during the day that say, I know you're there. And to me, that is a great expression of faith.
Right. And many times my prayer is, Lord, I don't know what to do about this.
Sure.
But here it is. You take care of it.
Yes.
Well,
I have a hard time with that one, Marlene, but I understand. Was there another? Okay. So,
Deborah.
Well, I was just going to say that the word tells us that is the will of Jesus Christ for us, is to pray continually.
Yes.
That's what he wants us to do. It says right here in the word in 1 Thessalonians. So,
yes. Yeah.
It doesn't just have to be a designated time set aside Tuesday at 3:00. It's continually. So that we're always in a posture of communicating with him is kind of how I look at it.
Exactly. And that's great. And that, to me, that's what God really wants. He wants to be a part of our lives.
That's right.
Not just this spirit up there flying around, it's talking to, and I find that also eases me. If I'm troubled, I will keep, I'm doing the dishes, I'll say something, it keeps him constantly in my life. And I think it helps prevent me from doing some bad things I'm inclined to do. What would God do in this circumstance? So, but I think to have him always in our mind is the best way for our relationship. And I think we find that with to me, I look at it like a husband and a wife. Okay. You don't just talk to when you get up in the morning and go to bed at night if it's a good relationship. Okay. But little things happen during the day that may sound stupid, and if I told you people half the things my husband and I talk about, you say, why do they bother? But it's that open communication. It's what keeps it alive. And I also feel very strongly that God has a great sense of humor. And I don't hesitate to make a little joke about something that I've done or not done. And I think he's smiling, Yes, Marlene.
And we also have to remember to say thank you.
Definitely.
Many good things happen to us during the day. And a simple thank you, God, you took care of that.
Yes.
Or thank you, God, for giving me that.
Yes. Yes.
Or thank you, God, for the green light.
Yeah, that's it. And I do. That's where my little prayer comes from, And I've got one that it has become an issue with me because I'm growing old. Okay. My fingers don't feel good and I've got arthritis. And I have so much trouble putting earrings on in the morning. Okay. Because my fingers slide and sometimes I don't have, this is critical for me, Kathy.
Oh, me too.
Go out
The
without my
earring
earrings.
thing. Yeah, the earring thing. Yeah.
So even though that's a very worldly thing, before I start, I say, please help me get these earrings on, and when I finally make that clip, it's like, oh, thank you, God. It went on, so, and that's why I think God's kind of got a sense of humor, because I'll pray to me, there's nothing too small to pray to God for.
Exactly.
And anybody who tells me differently, no, I can pray for anything, so, but in the morning, I hope it's your will that I get these suckers on, because I can't, they're not going easily, and he's a big help, so, because if he doesn't help me get them on, I got to get Jim to help me get them on, and he's not nearly as kind and generous about it as God is, so I'm interrupting something, so.
Right.
We go with that. So anyway, Hannah has this this talking honestly to God, and God knows what is in her heart, and that's the critical thing. As she prays to him out of the bitterness and anguish of her soul, so she calls on, O Lord of hosts, and I'm not sure we all get a good understanding of the word host, but host in the biblical sense is an army, and we call upon the host of heaven, and I think most of us think of this in terms of, I always did, as terms of angels, the host of angels, but when it refers to the angels, it's also referring to the angels are the army of Christ. They're the ones that have in biblical time, and I'm sure now, have entered physically into our world, materialized. We know we're going to come to it in a couple of minutes when we compare the Hannah and Mary. Okay, the angel Gabriel came to them. All right, so and they're help fighting God's cause. The angels are the ones that are fighting Satan. We all know about Saint Michael the archangel, and Michael was the one who. He's always fighting for the Lord. St. George slayed the dragon. Well, the dragon is just a symbolic example of Satan, but it's the same idea. So when we use the term host, we're really talking about an army. And an interesting note here says that Hannah is not using this term, Lord of hosts, or army, to go out and fight Peninnah. Well, anyway, the other wife, the other woman. So she's not wanting harm to come to her. She wants God to protect her, and armies protect. Okay, that's why we have our service men. Yes, Kathy.
In my book, my Bible here, there's a reference to the Lord of hosts is perhaps best understood as a general reference to the sovereignty of God over all powers in the universe, Lord Almighty, the NIV rendering the Lord Almighty, in the account of the establishment of kingship in Israel, it became particularly appropriate as a reference to God as the God of armies, right? Both of the heavenly armies. Yeah, both of the heavenly armies, and that's it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's armies. You know, we often use the term. There was an army of people there. Sometimes we think of it as just a big group. Okay, but when we think of big groups like that, they are protective, and so they're not always aggressive. Although when they're dealing with Satan, they're very aggressive. Okay, but it is a protection kind of thing, and that's why we have our armed forces, to protect our country. To keep us from further danger. So this is so the words that are being used here have a lot of meaning behind them. And an interesting note here, it says the term Lord of Hosts is used 260 times in the Old Testament.
Wow.
So that's a lot of using that word. Okay. With the idea of Lord of mighty armies, which is what you just said, Kathy. Hannah felt attacked by her rival, so she called on the Lord Almighty of mighty armies to be her protector. Now, Hannah makes a vow. Hannah promised her son to the work of the Lord, vowing he would be a Nazirite from birth. She says, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. And according to Numbers, the vow of the Nazirite includes the following. I'm just going to name them. We've already done the detail. First of all, it means abstinence from any product from a grapevine, because this signifies distance from all fleshly pleasures. So by saying you're not, they don't go through a list of, okay, I'm going to abstain from too many donuts. That's not good for me. I'm going to abstain from wine and beer, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it signifies the earthly sinful pleasures. Lust should be out of the picture. The second one is taking no part in any mourning for the dead, nor coming near a dead body, because the dead show the corruption and the fruit of sin. Now, that's something I've always wondered about when they have in the Old Testament that you're not supposed to go near the dead body. And I always thought it was because they're not very clean and you're going to get a disease. But yeah, we have to deal with dead bodies. I mean, if you are a soldier in battle, there's going to be a lot of dead, especially in those days, there's a lot of dead bodies floating around. And either you leave them there to rot or somebody has to move and bury them. Okay. So I accepted it, didn't think a whole lot about it, but I never really understood why dealing with the dead was an issue. I grew up in a thing where when I was a little kid, I went to the funeral parlor, and saw a dead body laid out there. So it became, it's something I came acquainted with and used to, and doesn't throw me off balance. But this was what they gave as what it meant. And boy, it opened up a whole new world to me. It says, because the dead show the corruption and the fruit of sin. So it's a symbolic type of reasoning behind this. All right. When God created Adam and Eve, there was no death. Okay. It was not in God's plan that we were to die. So when did corruption come into the picture? Anybody?
When they ate the fruit of sin.
Exactly, when they committed sin. When they went against the one thing God said don't do, okay? The devil talked her into doing it of her free will. She went and did it. And then she went and she got Adam to eat it. So corruption came after God's plan to create the people, the human race. So this is what this means when you are to stay away from the dead. All right. It's because it's significant of corruption. And the Nazarite is not supposed to have any involvement with being corrupt. All right. So, and the third thing was never cutting the hair, because this was a public, visible sign to others of the vow. And that was strictly and I think we all see today the Orthodox Jewish people with the hats and the weird little curlicues of hair coming down. And but as soon as you see someone like that, you know they're an Orthodox Jew. All right. So this was the same idea with the Nazarite. Yes, Jane.
I just wanted to thank you for explaining that about the dead bodies, because that does give a whole different perception to me of meaning that I never thought about before.
Yeah, see, I never did either. Yeah, until I read it, Jane. That was, this was the last week eye opener.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I never
very
thought of
helpful.
that, but it was corruption, and to remind us that didn't exist until man sinned, and that's why we have the issue, because that was not God's original plan at all. So, okay, so typically the vow of a Nazarite was taken for a set or rather short period of time. It was not a lifelong commitment. And that's what becomes important in Hannah's dealing with this. Okay, so and this is found in Judges. I was going to have Donna read this, but it's not important. Not that important. But in Judges, they go through. Someone said, Kim, you said before that Samson was a Nazarite. Okay, and this was, we encounter that in. He was a lifelong Nazarite, and that's very rare. Okay. Hannah says, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. The child was already dedicated to God because he would have been a Levite. Remember, Elkanah is a Levite, and his wife, Hannah, were from the Levitic tribe. They lived in the land of the Ephraim, but remember, the Levites did not have their own territory. They lived within other tribal communities to serve that community as the priest. Now, I'm not talking high priest. Where does the high priest have to come from?
The line of Aaron.
The line of Aaron, exactly. But there were a lot of other Levites, and they functioned as priests, but none of them as high priests. Okay, so this is the, so as a Levite, her son would be dedicated to God. But at the time of the Levite's special dedication to the Lord, an ordinary Levite, okay, that dedication and work only lasted from the ages of 30 to 50. Okay, there's only a 20-year span there that they were dedicated to do the work of the priest. So although they may have trained before, they were not officially a priest until they were 30. And then when they were 50, they retired. Not a bad working life, 30 to 50, depending on what the retirement plan is, but it's not so bad at this point in time. So but Hannah took something that already belonged to God. Remember, he's dedicated Levite, so he's given to God, all right? But she gave it back to God in an even greater way for his entire life. And in dedication of a Nazarite, which was a greater consecration than just being an ordinary Levite. So that was very important. And the other thing that strikes me as a mother, that if she had not dedicated him for his lifetime, she would have had him to raise, to live with, etc., from birth to 30, okay? But she didn't. We'll see momentarily, she gave him up. So she gave him up as a little baby. She did not have that, I say, joy of raising a child. Sometimes it's not quite that joyful, but overall, we enjoy raising our children and having that communication. And by the time our children are 30, the majority of them either have married and left the house or gotten jobs, hopefully, and left the house. So that separation is a very normal, and a normal part of life, but it's got to be very difficult to let go of a baby. Okay, this is so this was a big thing on her part, and knowing how this bothered her and it influenced her life through the years that she realized she was barren. She did not make this vow lightly. Okay, she did not suddenly say, "Oh, I'm in the temple today. How can I bargain with God?" And that's another issue. Okay, we have to be so careful that our prayer isn't a bargain with God. God, if you get me through thus and thus and so, I promise I will do this. For God, if I get through this, or I get this job, or I get over this illness, I'm going to donate $1,000 to the church. Okay, that's a bargain. I know it's tempting, and I know I've done it myself. I've been very guilty of it, but it's something that we have to be aware of why we're doing it and how we're doing it, and it has to come from the heart. My feeling is, if we say, yes, Janet.
You were saying that if he's raised as a Nazarite, she's not going to be raising him. How does that work?
He's dedicated to the temple. He's brought to the temple, and that's where he lives.
Ah.
Yeah. Now she can visit him, and this will all come out later. She visits him annually when they go to see to do their sacrifices and for the feast and everything. And so she sees him there, and each year she brings him a coat. She brings him a new, because he's growing, so she brings him a new coat. So there's contact. Okay, it's not that she never sees him again, but he does not live in her household or learn from her household. Okay, that is done in the temple. Laura?
I was just looking at my concordance, and it says that a Nazarite is a person consecrated to God for special service.
Yes.
Which is a very small definition, but pretty concise.
Yes, it is. Well, sometimes the smaller the better. It doesn't get round up with all this other stuff, okay? Yes, and they are for very, very specific. And now it wasn't up to her to determine what his service would be. Okay, that's God's plan. When you dedicate someone to do something, it's like going into the nunnery, okay? They dedicate themselves to something, and sometimes it's very specific, but that dedication is God determined, not mother determined. Okay, and we come momentarily to where she can keep him till he's weaned, but then he becomes God. He's always God, but then he goes actually, and I think there's the good word, into his service. Okay, and as a child, obviously, I'm sure he did a few household chores, or he may become a scribe to Eli or something like that. But basically, he's learning. He's got to learn the Torah. This is what has to be done, and where he goes with that. So, okay. We ourselves can be dedicated to God, not in that same way, but we can be dedicated to God. Okay. But it's also possible to give God a greater dedication. Where do you think our first dedication as Christians comes with our relationship with God? Maggie?
Baptism.
Yes,
Yeah.
baptism.
Barbara,
Yeah.
is BJ okay?
Yeah,
BJ, you okay?
You okay?
I'm just breathing, that's why.
Oh, bless your heart. Okay.
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 Yeah.
Take care. All right. So Hannah could easily have said, I don't need to dedicate my child to the Lord because it's already dedicated as a Levite. But she had a deeper dedication in mind, and that's why she vowed that he would be a Nazirite. Okay, and God knew exactly how she felt about that in her heart. She wasn't bargaining. I think that's the point I want to bring out. She wasn't saying, God, if you give me this son, he will be a Nazirite. This was something she felt if she were blessed enough to have a son, then he belonged to God. And that was the feeling. And I mean, I think it's absolutely wonderful that God knows it's in our heart, because there's too much other stuff we try to pull off, and it can really mess things up. So we got to be careful. Don't say it if it's not in your heart. Okay. All right. Kathy, would you please read chapter 1, verses 12 through 14?
12 through 14.
Please.
Okay. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine."
Okay, so she's left the dinner table. All right, she couldn't eat. She just was too, and she went to the temple. Good thing she went to the temple. Okay, and she is very, very upset. So when he's saying, "Are you drunk?" I don't think he's referring just to the fact that she was standing there praying. She was so upset. I'm sure she was crying. There was weeping. There was very emotional. This was a very emotional time for her. And sometimes when you are weeping and so emotional, you don't walk right either. You have to, you want to get yourself in that spot. You want to sit or kneel or whatever. Probably put your head in your hands. Marlene?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Finish
Just
what you were
resting?
saying. Okay. We have to remember that this is very rare. You know, she went to the temple, but remember in early days, women weren't allowed inside the temple.
No.
They had to stay outside. So for her and Eli, who was the presiding priest at that time, to come face to face tells us that this setup of Shiloh was probably very minimal. And of course, God arranged for the high priest to meet with Hannah because and speak with her, because that would be very rare.
There is a comment somewhere here. I don't think I've come to it, but it mentions that he is somewhere by a post.
It's in 9, I believe. It says
Okay.
Eli the priest was sitting on a chair by the doorpost of the Lord's tabernacle.
Okay, and I think that's part of it, Marlene, that he was sitting by the doorpost. So
Right,
he
but
wasn't in the inner part of the temple, but you know, the women could go just so far.
right.
Okay, but he was sitting by the doorpost, and this was when they spotted.
Yeah, but that in itself was probably rare.
That was, yes, I
That's
think that
God's
was more
hand at
rare.
work that
Right.
put him there.
Right, exactly. He put him in the right spot to see her. Yes. So he's sitting there. Maybe he wanted some fresh air. Obviously it was God's plan, but you know, he could have gone there to, well, I've walked around long enough. I need to sit for a few minutes. He may have been outside and come back and said, "Phew, I got to get off my feet for a little while." You know, we don't know why he sat there, but yes, God put him in that spot for it. This is all God's plan, all God's plan. Okay. So, anyway, and he sees this woman who, again, as I said, it's not merely her standing there moving her lips praying, because I don't think anyone would have questioned that, but she had to have more emotional signs and notifications that she is so upset. Okay. And he thinks that she's drunk. Okay. So now we have Also, I don't think, well, in fact, the commentator said it, but I thought this all on my own, that this prayer, or what she said, the vow she's just made and the little prayer, I'm sure she did a lot more praying before Eli came in with a comment. Okay. I mean, I can see her going up there and saying, God, I'm so upset. Why did she do this to me? Please help me through. Now, a lot of words, but those words weren't important to the story. Okay. The story is the fact that she said those words to God about dedicating her son. Okay. So those are the important, those are the words that are recorded. The rest of what went on is not that important. But so he's seen her, I'd say probably at least 5 minutes before he comes to this conclusion. Okay. So now Hannah spoke from her heart, but only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. It's very often good to pray aloud, because it can help us to better focus our thoughts. What we mentioned before, we sit there praying silently, and all of a sudden I've got all this stuff streaming out of me. The only good I feel comes from that, because I have to feel that I'm sitting there trying to pray to God. Okay. My thought is, well, even though my mind's wandering, I'm not out there doing something bad. So maybe there's something good, even, the prayers are at least going through my brain. Okay. So, but sometimes praying aloud does keep us awake, so to speak. But this passage in the Bible shows us that prevailing prayer doesn't need to be vocal. Okay. Effective prayer can be silent and in our heart, because God reads the heart. See, Eli couldn't read her heart, so he thought she was drunk. All right. God read her heart. He got the message. Okay. So it needs to come from the heart. And the same is true with sacrifices we make and the good works we do. Okay. They need to come from the heart. Okay. We shouldn't make a donation to the Red Cross, okay, just to show off, okay, or make a tax deduction. I mean, we do that, but we can't count that as prayer. Okay, that's my point. All right. For it to be prayer, it has to come from a reason of morality or good works, something we want to help. Okay. These other reasons may come in. Yes, it's a darn good tax deduction, but that's not what God's interested in. He's interested, are you doing this because you think this is a worthy cause and this is what should be done? Okay. So the question is asked by Eli, how long will you be drunk? And Eli misunderstands Hannah. This is interesting. The fact that he suspected she was drunk shows it may not have been unusual for people to become drunk at these fellowship meals with within God's tabernacle. The fact that Eli suspected Hannah of drunkenness does not speak well for what went on around the tabernacle. Okay, and let's face it, if you're sitting there and rejoice on Sunday morning and you see somebody staggering down the aisle and smelling of alcohol, hopefully that would be a very unusual occurrence, right? But to Eli, oh gosh, here comes another drunk. We got to get her out of here. So, which speaks very pointedly to the fact that the Israelite behavior, moral behavior, is still going downhill. Now we not only have idol worship, okay, but we got people who are drinking to the gods, okay, Bacchus, Baal, Moloch, all those gods. Those things those sacrifices went on. They didn't just stand there and pray to this God. And they drank while they did it. Okay. They had sex while they did it. Okay. There's all kinds of immorality going through, through the ordeal, so to speak. So for him to accept the fact that, oh gosh, here comes another drunk, it has to be a not uncommon practice anyway. So, and we all know some parties can get pretty wild. Okay. So, need to be careful. That's why a lot of people don't have their receptions at the church anymore. They go to a restaurant or something so they can not feel guilty about it, you know. So that's kind of the way that goes. Okay. The fact that Eli supposed her to be drunken, and the conduct of Eli's sons already mentioned prove that religion was at this time at a very low point in Shiloh. It seems that drunken women did come to the place, and probably lewd women were to be found there, because a lot of drunken women will come up to the guys looking for the money, and therefore this was happening. Okay. What was the cat? Kimberly Bowers, would you read verses 15 through 18, please?
Sure. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Eli answered, Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. She said, May your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went on her way and ate something. Her face was no longer downcast.
Okay. This goes back to what you said, Marlene. She did not accept Eli's accusation and leave, okay? But she did not respond in a haughty or arrogant manner by saying, you know, I'm not drunk. What do you think you're saying? Okay. She was very respectful. She realized he was the high priest. This was an unusual encounter. Okay. So she did not use an arrogant tone or anything, but she stood up for herself and she said, you know, this is not the problem. I am not drunk. Okay. She said, no, my Lord. She didn't respond haughty, and she explained herself, and she did it remembering that he was her high priest. She tells him, I poured out my soul to the Lord, and this is how we must pray. This is exactly what Hannah needed to do. Okay, she didn't take her anguish and her anger off in a corner and say, God, you've done this to me. What do you think you're doing? Why me? Why me? Why me? She didn't carry on with that. She didn't get me. She took it very honestly to God in the place that she felt she could talk to God. Okay. And, you know, she was very upset, very anguished, but she had to let it go. And this is what we need to do. And someone mentioned early about letting it go. Is your hand up, Jane, or?
I was just gonna let you know, you got about 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I got 12 here. I'm trying to rip through this little part. Okay. So she was pouring out her heart to God, and this was the place to do it. All right. And that's what we need to do. Don't hold the anguish. And don't you find when you're upset about something, the longer you hold it in here, the longer you think about it, the longer you stew over it, you only feel worse. You never, ever make it better, okay? But when you say, I need to bring this to God, I need to tell God yes, God knows how you feel, but you need to get that feeling that you're feeling out of here and give it to God. It's not easy to do this, okay? You need to say, you know, God, I'm feeling this way, you know, help me to forgive. I think this is a lot of our anguish and distrust and trouble comes from some interaction with someone else, okay? And we have to learn to do what Jesus said, forgive, okay? And so she needs to forgive somewhere along the line. It doesn't say she needs to forgive Penina how she's been. The woman doesn't know any better, okay? So how much better we feel when we do forgive. It's yours. Turn it over to you, God. I forgive these. I forgive who I did this to. And don't we feel better when we forgive? We don't have to love that person and take them back in our lives, but we need to say, okay, that's done with and over with. You are forgiven. God, you take over from here. Try to inspire them to be better. Okay. So she leaves, 1 minute. Okay, so at this, we need to get the blessing. So we'll start next week with the very end of this little group, the blessing and the promise and her reactions, okay? And then we'll get into the birth and dedication of Samuel. Okay, oh, closing prayer. Ugh. I want to do this prayer about peace. That's all I can kind of think of lately is peace in the world, peace in our community,
Boy, we need that.
peace, yes, peace in our homes and in our families, okay? Eternal God, in whose perfect kingdom, no sword is drawn, but the sword of righteousness, no strength known, but the strength of love. So mightily spread abroad your spirit, that all people may be gathered under the banner of the Prince of Peace, as children of one Father, to whom be dominion and glory, now and forever. Amen.
I mean,
Have a good week and a good
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you,
Okay.
Barbara.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
thank you, Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I gotta
Right,